Hey guys, this is Dorian Day and welcome to Sound Design number 3. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make 10 presets using filtered wavetables, which are from our new filtered wavetables pack. A filtered wavetable is basically a table that represents the motion of a filter running over some waveform. So I'll choose 1, which is just a basic saw. And you can see as we move wavetable position, the sound is filtered out. Now these have tons and tons of sound design possibilities, and that's what this video is for. I'm going to show you at least 10 ways how to use it, but there's pretty much a limitless number of ways. I'm going to hand it over to my partner Erik, who's going to describe what's in the pack before I go over how to make all the presets in the pack. I was really nice and I released the best preset for the demo, so if you want to get the first preset that I'm going to make, it's in the demo pack, so go grab that at SickTwistedMinds.com.
Hey guys, this is Erik from STM Studios. I'm glad to be here today to show you our 2 new products, analog filters and digital filters. They're similar in content, but one was made from the Analog Delusions wavetable pack, and digital filters was made from digital apocrypha wavetables, both using high quality plugins. Here in analog filters, the first thing you'll see is the cover art and the demos. In the first folder, then frames, you have a frame of each of the basic waves and our VIP frames. Next, you have the instructions on how to use this pack and what's included. Next, we have the presets. These presets showcase the strength of filtered wavetables. Next, we have the tables themselves. We have the bandpass table, which you get 64 wavetables. High pass tables, you get 64 or 5 different types of wavetables. Low pass tables, you get another 64 or 5 different types of tables. And the same thing for unfiltered tables. You get 64 of 5 different tables. The last thing are the tips on how these were made. Alright guys, I'm going to pass it back to Dorian. He'll take it off from here.
Alright, let's go over the Mouse Plucks one first, since that's the demo preset and probably the one everyone wants to see anyways. So one of the bass sounds, or the bass sound, is this Debussy wavetable right here. However, I made a custom wavetable so that you had a whole load of bass sounds, so you could go from the Debussy, which is basically like the root and a fifth and different octave combinations of those. But you can change the bass sound by changing the waveform. So if you want a traditional saw mouse pluck, then switch around there. But we'll stick with the Debussy. The first thing that makes this particular patch so cool is the AFW table, or one of the high pass square tables from the analog filters pack that we just released on Sick Twisted Minds. And what this does is it gives you a high pass square. And it adds an interesting high end, as we'll see as we get the pack, or as we get this preset more built out. The way I'm modulating the wavetable position is I'm putting an LFO on it, and then I'm also putting an LFO on the volume level, but I'm setting it to maximum level. And then I have macro 1 as an auxiliary source on wavetable position. I should probably have it on volume too, but it's too late. And that makes it so that the macro controls the amount of this LFO affecting wavetable position. With it at full amplitude like this, it's essentially just a constant value. So the knob acts as exactly like a knob. But if I lower and turn this into an LFO, you can see the wavetable moving. So that's how you can switch this from like an evolving kind of high-end sound to just a constant, which is what we did for this patch. Next we have blur. Blur is like combination detune, phase random switches, and stereo width because of the unison settings. So set blur to detune. I put it up to about half, blend up to about half, random to full. Same on oscillator B. And then the 7th thing is a slight bit of mix on this hyper dimension. So you can see those settings, as well as the reverb. But I would turn the reverb off and use it in your DAW. This is just kind of to make the preset a little more open, and it's very, very low mixed. So after that, you have cutoff. Cutoff is basically just on the cutoff of the filter right here, and just a little bit of drive. And then finally we have the pluck. Pluck works similar to LFO1 in that we are using LFO2 on the level of oscillator A, the level of oscillator B, and cutoff filter. And then that is, once again, auxiliary sourced by macro 4 to induce plucking. And if you click pluck, you'll see that it also lowers the volume level on each of the oscillators so that you have more room for the pluck, because if you just have these volume on max, then you don't have any room for the amplitude to actually increase and then decrease to get a plucking sound. So that basically does it for the patch. I can just show you a little bit of usage. So I'm going to play it. And right there, you can see the difference with the high pass table or not. You can hear that when we're plucking, the amount of the high pass table adds that sort of like metallic bright sheen sound. All right, that does it for the mouse plucks. Okay, next we have the Slice FX. This is modeled after a Hans Zimmer sound in a Zebra pack. I think it's actually his. It's like a Ninja Star kind of sound, like you would have found in The Dark Knight. And this is me trying to imitate that. So how does it work? Well, first of all, it utilizes two of our bandpass tables. Two separate ones, and you morph between them. Correct? Yes. Well, it's more of an addition. So I took two bandpass tables, and as you morph or move through Wavetable, I'm going to initialize. You morph through the frequency range, and this kind of gives the impression of like sideways movement. sounds that tend to go from high to low, like in terms of pitch or total frequency, sound kind of going up, and the opposite sound like they're going down. But if you sort of like sweep through the frequency range, it tends to, at least to me, to sort of sound like a side-to-side type motion, like a swipe. And that's the theory behind this slice preset. So the main movement is having an LFO that's sort of used as an envelope on the wavetable position of both oscillators, and also on verb wet right here, so that the verb kind of swells as it evolves, and it's not an initially wet sound. So then we also have a second LFO for the noise and the bandpass, and it's important to note that these are set on envelope mode so that they're one shot. You press it one time and it only runs once. This one's set on BP. You can change how long things last by changing the rate knob. I chose a quarter. This one's on the noise, and it's actually, there's a swell rate knob over here that we'll go over. And finally, this LFO acts as it's on the verb too. So it's an additional swell. I'm not quite sure why I did that, but it still sounds cool. And once again, make sure that LFO2 is on this band pass. So basically the noise is growing, it's enveloping, and then also there's a band pass on it so that it sweeps similarly to the tables. Next we'll go over the macros. Morph increases the volume of the second macro, or the second oscillator, which has a more metallic sound, and it also pushes the oscillators to left and right, and so it widens. Next we have blur, which is on detune and blend of both oscillators, and then also on the mix of hyper. It widens out the sound. Swell rate is on the time of LFO2. Show you first. Noise, because you need noise for swell rate. Noise is or macro 4, which is noise, is a modulator on LFO2 noise level. So noise level isn't affected by LFO2 unless this is up. And then the swell rate changes how quickly it swells. So there you go. It's a cinematic sound effect for movies, if that's what you're doing, or video games. And then also you can use it in music. Okay, next we have the Clavichord. It sounds somewhere in between like a super saw or saw pluck and a Clavichord, which is mostly controlled by this brightness knob. So I grabbed a saw low pass table and a square high pass table, but one with a lot of harmonics. And I mix them. Then we have a wavetable position knob. It's set as brightness, so it increases the amount of upper harmonics on the saw wave. It increases the amount of harmonics on the high pass square wave because, you know, it's in the opposite direction of a low pass table. And then it changes the filter cutoff. Next we have blur. Blur is detune, blend, random, detune, blend, random with unison of 5. And we're at full width. And I set it to super saw stack. Pluck turns this into a pluck. And you do that by decreasing the sustain on your main envelope. And where else? It affects how much envelope 1 it affects filter here. This is where the pluck is. I forgot. So it lowers the cutoff so that we have once again some room to pluck, and then it increases the amount that envelope 1 is affecting cutoff. Next we have release, which just increases the release of envelope 1. And then over here, and I might have forgotten to mention this on some of the other presets, is that you have velocity on the gain of EQ for note or key tracking so that we have more high end. And then we have a little bit of velocity on the cutoff, which only matters if you're using pluck, because otherwise cutoff is at full. And here's the rest of the matrix in case I didn't go over something, but I'm pretty sure that's it. So there you have it. That's the Clavichord. All right, next we have the MorphBass, which is basically a saw that transforms into a bandpass table that has a number of harmonics in it. You can see that the morph knob is on wavetable position, decreasing the amount of harmonics on the first oscillator, increasing its randomness, increasing the wavetable position of the second oscillator, moving towards higher harmonics, increasing the detune, increasing the blend, increasing the cutoff, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then also on it decreases the amount of mix on the distortion. Changes the frequency right there, which you can see, and there's one more thing. It increases one thing missing somewhere. And so you go from this mono forceful saw bass to sort of like a thin detuned pad. Fat is on, decreases the level of the first oscillator and then increases the drive of the second filter and its mix. Distortion increases the amount of drive. And then reverb is on reverb mix, the size of the dimension expander and the size of the reverb. There's nothing else special going on, really. So you could just use, this is, I think we already talked about that. I want to find that other one. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's all of them. So that's everything for this patch. Okay, next we have a riser FX. So you start with two high-pass saw tables. You make LFO1 into an envelope with set your rate to fast, but we're going to modulate that with this macro. And then put it on the level of noise, wavetable position, cutoff. And then filter 1, 2, 3, 4. It's on the reverb. Whenever I can't find it, it's always on the FX. Okay. LFO2 is on pitch right here. It goes till about 19, which is kind of important. You don't want it to go too high. It doesn't, it's too much modulation, depending on what starting note you're using. But this is 22 and 19, so there's a slight amount of detuning that happens as the envelope increases. Next, I have this intense knob. And basically what this does is it increases the amount and blend of this second oscillator. And what makes this oscillator so much more intense than the first is that in the global settings, I have it set to 12 plus a perfect fifth times 3. So it's not exactly sure how it splits up, but your notes are occupying at least the octave, and then I think it's the perfect fifth 3 octaves above. And that gives you a really rich sound. And it's kind of tense. That's why I called it intense, is because it builds tension, which is pretty cool. Then you have cutoff and time. Time is on the rate of the pitch LFO. And also LFO1. And it just changes the speed of how fast everything happens. These macros aren't the most accurate way to set BPM accurate rate settings. So if you want it to be exactly 16 bars or 32 bars or 4 bars, then you should probably disengage this macro and set it manually on both envelopes. I guess a couple notes. The reason I'm using these high pass tables is because they filter themselves out. So these filter out, and then the noise is still going, and then this high pass filter filters the rest of the way. Too slow. Because you can see that the high pass tables are completely filtered before the actual filter reaches all the way to the top. I used bright noise, and I think that's it. Okay. Okay, now we're going to do Schreech FX. This is a multi-purpose sound effects patch. You can use it as like a trap horn or even like a Dutch lead, but it can sound like transformers or cars and planes or flies, all kinds of crazy stuff that I'll play around with, because this is one of the cooler patches. So you have a high pass sine table that has a lot of harmonics in it. One thing about these tables is that even if it's called sine, obviously a sine only has one harmonic, so that wouldn't be very interesting, but they're pretty heavily processed in most cases, so there's other stuff going on. And then I grabbed Subby Saw, which is a formula right here. Subby. Am I wrong? Analog? BS2. subby saw. And we have, I guess most importantly, let's go with the LFOs. So LFO 1 is on wavetable position A and wavetable position B. So the harmonics come in and out from the one on the left, and the one on the right is kind of providing weight. There's that like growl. LFO2 we have on the volume of the second oscillator. And they're set to slightly different rates. And then we have LFO3 on the fine-tuned pitch of subby saw. So it's constantly rising and falling. Rise is on the cutoff of this bandpass filter on the fine control pitch on both oscillators. That creates that rise. Sub we have on the level of sub, and then I have this 2 octaves up because you play it pretty low. If you have the sub at the same octave, then it you can't hear it. It's way too low in frequency. What's the second thing? Macro 2 also goes to EQ volume level right here. So it increases the gain of the low end. Next we have Crush, which increases the amount of drive on the downsample distortion and increases the cutoff filter on the second high pass so that the sound is filtered out as it's crushed. And then you have Stereo. Stereo is detune and blend on the first oscillator, and also rate, mix, and mix on hyper and hyper dimension. So then we also have noise. I don't know if you can. It goes to the filter, so you can only hear it with the rise. And I'm just going to mess around with it for a minute before stopping. Okay, next we have the Sliding Banjo patch, which is pretty simple. This is kind of just a bonus. It doesn't really rely on anything too special. It just happens to be this one cool bandpass table that sounds like a banjo. Not so much if you change, right? But right there. So this is a cool thing to have as the high end on something else. It's just this table, so you pretty much need this table. And then there's slide and portamento. And I guess some effects. Yeah, there's reverb, matrix. What's the LFO doing? The LFO is increasing the wavetable position so that it slowly filters out and gets pretty bright. Wavetable 3. Or LFO 3, that is on the course, is on the pitch. So there's a slight amount of vibrato, very, very slow and mild. You can just barely hear it. LFO 4 is set to LFO rate 3 and envelope decay. So the vibrato slowly increases, and actually I think this feature is for another patch. Yeah, I don't have Zap on. So that does it. This is just a bonus, really. Here's another pretty simple patch. This is a FreqSplitBass. And the whole purpose of this is to exhibit how you can split up the low end and the high end of your sound design when you have these low pass or high pass tables. So on the left I have a saw, a filtered saw, and on the right I have a high pass square. And you can easily control how many or how much of the harmonics you want of each one of these waves. And if you don't like this high end, you can switch it out. And instantly turn up, tons of different kinds of basses, and you can do the same with the low end. And then even, I suppose, if you wanted to, you could sidechain the low and the high separately without frequency splitting or a multi-band sidechain, because you could do this. Probably should put some on the high end. So there you go, that's a frequency split bass. Okay, next we have Wobble Bass, which is basically just like a dubstep wobble. Now, I did this using a low pass table so that I can have the low passing independent of the filter, at least on this one wavetable, and then I have a high pass table over here. And the morph is, so I have an LFO on the wavetable position of oscillator A, and also one on B, but they're oppositely positioned. So I have wavetable A all the way filtered, at the same time that this one is all the way filtered, because this is a high pass table. So these are both all the way filtered at the same time, and then they come all the way unfiltered at the same time. However, there's a setting on macro 2 or macro 1 where they're inversely auxiliary sourced, so only one happens at a time unless it's positioned in the center. And this way, you can truly morph between the two. This is only the one on the left. Probably should have switched that left and right. No, it's flipped, but oh well. So you can get different combinations of the filtering sound. And you can see if you turn the main filter off, it's not really doing much. It's pretty much the sound of the wavetables. It adds a little bit of smoothness to it. Next, you have LFO, which basically just increases the rate. There's a sub on. Blur is the detune, blend, and randomness on the two oscillators with unison at 5. And blend increases the wavetable position of oscillator B, which induces harmonics. And this basically allows you to override the morph inversion, so that even if I'm all the way on the left filter, I can add some if you hear. We have a little bit of hard clipping distortion on the FX and a slight bit of flanging. I think that does it. I don't know if I said rate, but we'll do it. Or I know I said it, I just don't know if I tested it. Alright, that does Wobble Bass. Okay, this patch is pretty complicated, so I'm just going to show the matrix screen first for you to look at it. This is the ZapLord patch. It's a combination Zap, trap horn, and then also festival lead that you can change with the macros. So hopefully if I don't do the best job explaining it, you can at least look at this and get on the right track. So I start with a high-pass saw table and a high-pass square table. They each have 5 unison. And we'll just go over blur first. Detune, blend, random, detune, blend, random, just like always. Okay, next we have rise, fall. Rise, fall determines the speed, determines how. It does several things. The most obvious thing, or at least on attack, is it changes your perception of whether it's rising or falling. The further you get to either edge, the less drastic it is. The closer to the center, the more. But it also changes its overall evolution. And how this works is it increases the rate of LFO4, or changes the rate of LFO4. And LFO4 is set to okay, it's set as an auxiliary mod on for LFO3, which we'll go over that setting in a second, and then it's also the LFO3 rate right here. So, and then what is LFO3 on? Well, LFO3 is on our fine coarse pitch of either of the oscillators. So, basically this envelope right here determines where on this pitch modulation these oscillators are. And then LFO4 is determining how quickly we're going through this envelope. So if it's really fast, you're on the down portion and it starts sounding falling. That's why on this side of the circle. And if you're on the left side of the macro, then you're more in this portion, so it sounds like it's rising. And you can even see it on the graph. or something like that. Like, this is sort of an experimental kind of, I got to this. I knew the direction to go in, but it's sort of hard to explain exactly what's going on and how these are interacting. It has something to do with the amount of detuning, which I guess is the same. And finally, we have LFO2 on wavetable position so that they filter out. We have Zap. Zap increases the decay on envelope 2. Envelope 2 is set on coarse control of these two oscillators. I think there's an incorrect setting here. There's actually an error. I didn't intend for this to be bidirectional, but it sounds cool, so that's neat. And that's where you start getting the zap. Probably too much reverb. And you can blur it. So that's like a somewhere in between a festival lead and a zap. Unblur it. And then there you go. That's like a trap lead or close to it, especially with the reverb on. Not that that's a trap melody. I think that's everything. I'll look over the matrix one more time. So pause, try and get these settings. And I know this is a long video, so it's going to be hard to search. So once again. All right, that does it for 6 Sound Design number 3. Thanks.